They ran into the road like they had nothing left to lose. Two German Shepherd puppies, maybe 4 months old, bolted into traffic under the brutal Scottsdale sun. Their black and tan coats flashed in the light, their paws skimming the asphalt as they ran straight at my truck. I slammed the brakes. Dust flew. One stood on his hind legs, waving his front paws. The other barked with a sound that didn't match his size. Urgent, sharp, like an alarm going off. I jumped out. "Hey, what are you doing?" They didn't flinch. Instead, they turned and sprinted toward the brush off the road. I hesitated, but something about the way they moved together, focused, told me this wasn't panic. It was purpose. I followed them, heart racing. They darted through dry brush, thorns scraping my legs, then stopped beside a shape half buried in the sand. That's when I saw her. Her body was more bone than dog. Flies circled her nose, her ribs stuck out like wire hangers under faded black fur. She didn't move, not even when her puppies cried. One licked her closed eye. The other whimpered and nosed her muzzle. I hadn't touched a dog in years. Not since Duke. Not since I watched cancer take him from me piece by piece. But something in their eyes said, "This wasn't about me." I dropped to one knee. "Sweet girl," I whispered. "Can you hear me?" Her breath rattled. Her side barely moved. I reached forward, slow, careful. And that's when I saw the collar, worn, nearly falling apart, tucked under the edge. Something pale, a slip of paper, brittle with sun and dirt. I unfolded it with fingers I couldn't keep steady. She tried. She did everything. That's all it said. Max, the male pup, stepped between me and her, planted his feet, and gave a single soft bark. No fear, just urgency. I looked at her again. This broken mother baking in the Arizona sun, still trying to protect what she had left. "My name's Thomas. I fix cars I keep to myself, and I promised myself I'd never get close to another dog again. But these two had found me for a reason. She was still alive, barely, and her pups had led me straight to her like it was their last hope. But was I already too late to make it matter?" She growled, but it was the kind of sound that broke your heart more than it scared you. Low, weak, protective. I froze where I crouched beside her. Max moved fast, wedging himself between me and her snout like a tiny shield. Bailey pressed her side against her mother's, nuzzling her ribs with her nose. "I'm not going to hurt her," I whispered. "I promise." But they didn't know that. All they knew was that their world was falling apart, and they were the only ones standing between her and the end of it. I reached slowly into my back pocket and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered. I'd kept the local shelter's number in my contacts for years, but never thought I'd actually use it. I'd driven past their sign 1,000 times. Brave Shelter, white letters against blue. I remember thinking how hopeful it sounded. Now I was dialing it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Brave Shelter. "This is Kelsey. I need help," I said, trying not to sound as desperate as I felt. "It's a German Shepherd. 3 of them, 2 pups, 1 adult. She's barely breathing. Are you safe?" "Yeah, but she's not. They're just off Highway 101 near the Indian Bend Wash Trail. Please, she's not going to last long. We're on our way. 10 minutes or less." 10 minutes. I looked at the mother dog again. Her breasts were shallow, her gums pale. Her eyes didn't open. She didn't twitch when Bailey licked the side of her face. Max turned and looked at me. Stared, really, like he was trying to decide if I was the right kind of person. I'd seen that look once before. Duke gave it to me the day I picked him up from the rescue years ago. The same quiet question. "Will you stay even when it gets hard?" My throat clenched. "I don't know if I can do this again," I muttered, but I didn't move. Couldn't. I tore open a bottle of water I had in the truck and set the cap down beside her lips, but she didn't react. Max sniffed it, then nudged it closer. Bailey lay down and rested her chin on her mother's shoulder like she was keeping watch. "I'm here," I said softly. "You're not alone." Far down the highway, a dust plume rose, vehicle approaching fast. I looked at the mother dog, at the trembling pups who refused to leave her side. Could we move her without breaking her? The van pulled up fast, white, marked with dusty paw prints and a faded decal on the door. A woman jumped out before the tires even stopped turning. Cargo pants, vet scrubs, sharp eyes. She knelt beside me without a word. "She's still breathing," I said barely. She nodded, then tapped her radio. "Adult female, GSD, extreme emaciation. Get the stretcher." Two more team members moved quickly from the back of the van. One unfolded a canvas stretcher. The other opened a kit and started checking vitals. Max and Bailey didn't move. Max barked once, sharp, uncertain, then growled when one of the men reached for his mother. "It's okay, boy," I said, crouching low beside him. "They're here to help, just like me." He looked at me, then back at the vet. Then slowly he stepped back, but only by a foot. Bailey stayed pressed to her mother's side until the last possible second. One of the techs gently lifted her away, holding her like she was made of glass. The vet looked at me. "We'll need help loading her. She's critical, but if we're quick, we've got a shot." I nodded, no hesitation. We moved together, lifting her carefully, avoiding her hips and spine. She weighed almost nothing. A dog her size should have been 70 pounds. Easy. She felt like half that. Once she was loaded, the tech secured an IV, clipped sensors to her paw pads, and closed the doors. I stood there, not ready to let them drive away. The vet caught my look. "You coming?" I blinked. "Can I?" "They trust you. That matters." I turned to Max and Bailey. They were sitting now side by side watching the van. No barking, no fear, just waiting. I opened my truck door and they jumped in like they'd done it 100 times before. Max settled on the passenger seat, tail thumping. Bailey curled in the floorboard, head on her paws. We followed the van. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a plan. But as I watched those two puppies in my truck, covered in dust, eyes wide with something deeper than fear, I realized something. I wasn't ready to love again. Not after Duke. Not after watching the life fade out of those eyes I had sworn I'd protect. But they didn't care. They already chose me. They wouldn't leave the door. Inside the shelter's back room, their mother lay on a steel table under soft white lights, surrounded by machines in silent urgency. Max sat planted like a statue just outside the doorframe, ears up, eyes locked on the frosted window. Bailey whimpered every time she heard a beeping noise from inside. I sat down beside them on the tile floor. Cold, quiet. My hands smelled like dust and fear. "They're stabilizing her," the vet said softly, crouching beside me. "We've got fluids running. She's severely dehydrated, body temp's low. We'll monitor her overnight," but she didn't finish. I nodded. I didn't need the rest of the sentence. Max inched closer and pressed against my side. Bailey crawled into my lap like she didn't know she'd grown too big for that. I didn't stop her. "I had a dog once," I said aloud, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. His name was Duke. Black lab, smart, loyal, died on a Tuesday. I remember because the mechanic shop had just switched to new hours. Max tilted his head. I was holding him when he took his last breath. Cancer. He didn't look sick until it was too late. And when he went, I promised myself that was it. No more dogs. No more heartbreak. Bailey licked my wrist gently. Max tucked his nose under my arm. Then you two showed up. A soft whine came from behind the glass. Bailey stood, tail stiff, ears high. The vet poked her head out. "She's breathing more evenly now. Still weak, still dangerous. But there's something in her. Some fight." I looked at Max. "That's where you get it from." Time passed slowly. Other dogs barked in the distance. A volunteer walked by with a leash and a nervous-looking beagle. But we stayed there. Just the three of us rooted to that hallway, waiting for something to change. I don't know how long we sat like that. Hours, maybe. The light changed. Max fell asleep with his head on my boot. Bailey dozed off and twitched in her dreams. A tech walked by and did a double take. "Those two haven't moved once," he said. "It's like they know." They did. They weren't just hoping. They were guarding her the only way they knew how. With presence, with patience, with everything inside their little hearts. I leaned my head back against the wall and stared up at the flickering light above us. Was I ready to watch another dog fade away? Max was the first to move. He stretched, shook out his tiny frame, then walked over and gently nudged my knee. I looked down at him. expecting another stare, another silent question. Instead, he climbed into my lap without asking. I didn't breathe for a moment. Bailey followed. She didn't sit. She dropped a chewed-up ball at my feet. It wasn't new. It wasn't clean, but it was hers and she wanted me to have it. I reached down and picked it up. She wagged her tail twice and sat, watching my every move. "You two are something else," I muttered, voice barely above a whisper. The shelter hallway wasn't quiet anymore. Somewhere down the corridor, someone was mopping. The whine of a puppy echoed from another room. A pit bull barked once, deep and nervous. But Max and Bailey didn't flinch. They sat like they belonged here, like they'd done this before. A volunteer passed by and paused, smiling down at them. "They haven't left her side since she came in," she said. "Did you see how they moved like they were one mind, one body?" I nodded. "Yeah, like a mission." The door behind us creaked open. A tech poked her head out. "We're keeping her in critical care for now, but her pulse is stronger. We've got her temperature back up. Can I see her?" I asked. She shook her head gently. "Not yet." Bailey's ears drooped. Max let out a low, frustrated whimper. "Soon," she said softer. I leaned against the wall again, the chewed ball still in my hand. Max rested his head on my leg. Bailey stretched out across my boots. "I don't know what I'm doing here," I whispered. "I really don't." But deep down I did. They were scared, but not broken, vulnerable, but not helpless. And through the fear in their eyes, there was something else now. Trust. Not just in the people around them, or the room or the machines keeping their mother alive. In me. Bailey rolled over, belly exposed. Max blinked slow and calm. They weren't just surviving. They were holding each other together. She stopped eating. Bailey turned her nose away from the bowl and backed into the corner of the small kennel run. Ears flat, eyes hollow. Max paced in tight little circles, bumping into the water dish without noticing. The volunteers said it might be stress. I knew it was more than that. Their mother wasn't getting better. I visited every day, even when I had jobs stacked at the shop. I sat on the cold linoleum floor beside their enclosure and talked to them like they were old friends. Told them stories about Duke, about how he used to bark at the vacuum like it owed him money, how he once stole an entire Thanksgiving turkey off the counter and buried it in the garden. Bailey never laughed, obviously, but one day she did wag her tail just once. Max climbed into my lap again, curling himself tighter than he needed to. I felt him tremble, even though the room was warm. That night I stayed late. The techs didn't ask me to leave. I think they saw it too. The way Max leaned on me, the way Bailey's ears twitched every time someone mentioned her mother. Around midnight, something changed. Bailey stood suddenly, nose in the air. Max stopped pacing. They both turned toward the door at the end of the hallway. I followed their gaze. A soft voice echoed from the ICU. She blinked. I was on my feet before I knew it. The vet stepped out, wiping her hands on her scrubs. She's still weak, still critical, but she opened her eyes. She responded to touch. Max barked once, tail thumping. Bailey stood tall, head tilted. She reacted when someone brushed her muzzle. I think she knows they're here. My throat tightened. She heard them. She's fighting, and I think they're the reason why. I crouched down and wrapped my arms around the puppies. Max licked my jaw. Bailey buried her face in my chest and let out a noise I'd never heard from her before. A tiny, hopeful whine. They'd been so still for days, so frozen in their grief. And now there was movement again. A flicker, a breath. "She's a fighter," the vet said, "but it's going to be a long road." I looked at the pups. Then, "Let's start walking it." The next morning I stood in the shelter office signing temporary foster paperwork. They were overloaded, and Max and Bailey needed space, stability, calm. I hesitated before signing. My hand hovered over the paper. Bailey nuzzled my leg. Max pawed at the door. I sighed, smiled a little. All right, let's go home." Leaving her behind felt like betrayal, but she'd want them safe. The silence at home was louder than I remembered. Max walked in like he owned the place, sniffing every corner of the living room with military precision. Bailey stayed closer, brushing against my leg with every step, pausing often to look back at the door, waiting, maybe hoping, for their mom to appear behind us. I hadn't prepared for this. The only things I had left from Duke were a worn-out leash, a faded food bowl, and a dusty dog bed I never had the heart to throw out. I set it down in the living room, unsure of what they'd think. Bailey walked over and pressed her nose into it, then looked up at me. "This was his spot," I said softly. "He guarded this room like it was his job." She circled once, then laid down in it without hesitation. Max patted over and dropped beside her, nose against her shoulder, the exact way he'd curled up against his mother in the dirt. I stood there a minute, just watching them. My arms hung useless at my sides. The phone buzzed on the counter. She ate a little. The vet's voice came through, quiet, but steadier than before. "Not much, but it's a start." She even lifted her head. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until I let it out. "You think she's turning a corner?" "I think she's remembering what she's fighting for." I looked at the two puppies sprawled out on Duke's old bed, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm. Still fragile, still hurting, but here, alive. "Keep me posted," I said. "Anything changes, day or night, you'll be the first." That night, Max curled up on the couch like it was made for him. Bailey slept beside the bed, her paw resting on the edge of my blanket, like she needed to know I was still there. I didn't sleep much. Every sound in the house felt unfamiliar, even though I'd lived here alone for years. At some point past midnight, I got up and walked through the dark house, stopping by the old toy bin where Duke's things still lived. A rubber ball, a stuffed duck missing a wing, his collar still smelling faintly of leather and dirt in him. My fingers closed around it. I didn't cry. Not really, but something cracked quietly. Morning came too soon, bright and sharp. Bailey barked once at the sound of a car outside. Max followed her to the window, tails wagging. I stood there, coffee in hand, watching them light up the room just by being in it. The house wasn't empty anymore, but my heart was still afraid to open. They started changing things. Max learned how to open the bottom cabinet in the kitchen. Bailey figured out how to bark only once when she needed to go out. Together, they turned my silent house into something that breathed again. Messy, loud, and alive. But grief doesn't leave just because you add noise. Some nights I'd find myself staring at the old dog door Duke used to push through. Max would walk past it without a glance. Bailey sniffed at it once, then moved on. But me, I saw ghosts in that flap, heard paws that weren't there. Still, every morning there they were. Max sitting at the end of the bed, ears perked like a soldier waiting for orders. Bailey curled next to me with her head on my chest, breathing slow and steady. I never asked them to stay. They just did. I caught myself laughing more. It started with Max bringing in a stick from the backyard that was twice his size. He got it jammed in the doorway and looked up at me like, "Help, human." Bailey tackled him as soon as he got inside, and they tumbled across the tile like it was a wrestling mat. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Later that day, I found myself in the pet store, wandering aisles like I didn't belong there. I hadn't stepped foot inside one since Duke passed. The smell of rawhide and cedar chips used to make my chest tighten, but this time it didn't. I bought 2 new beds, 3 squeaky toys, some fancy food I couldn't pronounce, and on impulse, 3 collars. Not 2, 3. The cashier raised an eyebrow. 3 dogs. "Someday," I said. That night, as I was folding laundry, the phone rang. "Her fever's gone," the vet said. She stood for a few seconds. We think she recognized one of the techs, wagged her tail. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy gripping the edge of the counter with both hands. "She's not out of the woods, but she's walking toward the edge now." Max tilted his head when he saw my face. Bailey climbed onto the couch, resting her chin on my shoulder like she knew. I whispered it out loud, more to them than anyone. "She's coming back." Bailey's tail thumped once. Max licked my arm. I looked over at the collars on the table. Red, blue, and black, all lined up. Was I ready to let them all in? All 3 of them. She was waiting at the gate when we arrived. The moment the shelter tech opened the door, Max and Bailey leapt from the truck like arrows loosed from a bow. I barely had time to shut the engine off before they were halfway across the gravel, paws skimming the ground, tails straight as flags in the wind. Their mother stood there, still thin, still unsteady, but upright. Her legs wobbled, her fur was patchy, and her eyes were tired. But she was standing. When she saw them, her ears perked, her mouth opened just slightly, just enough to let out a breath that might have been a whine, a sigh, or something in between. Bailey reached her first and let out a high-pitched yelp, the kind I hadn't heard before. It sounded like relief, like coming home. Max slowed, more cautious, then tucked himself under her chin. She licked his head, then Bailey's, then tried to sit, but her legs buckled. The tech stepped in, but I waved them off. "Let her have this," I said. "She's earned it." I took a few steps back, letting them have the moment. It hit me then, watching them all together, that I'd never seen her like this. Alive, awake, present. I'd only known her as a shadow on the ground, a breath away from fading. Now she was mother again, and they were whole. She nuzzled each of them, checked their faces, their ears, their paws, like she was counting them over and over, making sure no part of them had been lost. One of the techs stepped up beside me. She's still on meds, still regaining muscle, but she wanted out of the kennel this morning. First time she stood without help. "What made her do it?" I asked. He pointed to Max and Bailey. They did. She looked thinner than I remembered, but not empty. There was weight in her eyes now, something stronger than survival. Love. Around her neck was a new collar, plain black leather with a silver tag that glinted in the sunlight. I leaned in and read it. She did everything, and it worked. Bailey barked once and nudged me with her nose. Max followed, pressing against my hip. I crouched low, holding out my arms, and they came in together, fur and warmth and heartbeat. She followed slowly until her head was against my chest, and all three of them were wrapped around me. I wasn't a mechanic anymore. Not in that moment. I was theirs. That day I didn't just bring them home. I brought back life. The living room looked different with all three of them in it. Max staked out the window seat like he was on patrol. Bailey carried toys from one end of the house to the other, organizing them into piles only she seemed to understand. And their mother, she didn't move much at first. She'd pick a spot near the doorway and just watch like she was still making sure everything was safe. But every day she got stronger. I never gave her a new name. She never needed one. She was mom to them, to me, to the space she filled just by being in it. I took the week off from work, told the guys at the shop I had a family emergency, and they didn't ask questions. Maybe it was the way I said it. Maybe it was because for the first time in years, I said it with something like joy. We spent the mornings in the backyard, Bailey chasing butterflies, Max barking at sprinklers, Mom resting under the shade of the mesquite tree. She'd lift her head whenever they got too far. And when they came running back to check on her, she'd lick their faces like she was counting blessings. The neighbors started dropping by. One brought a box of treats. Another brought a used dog ramp for the back porch. A little girl from down the street asked if she could draw them. She sat on the grass with a pink crayon clutched in her fist, carefully sketching Max, Bailey, and the mom. It stuck. Even the mailman started saying morning crew when he passed the gate. The old bed Duke used to sleep in. It became their throne. Bailey stretched across it like a queen. Max curled at her feet like a loyal knight. Mom curled beside them, front paw draped gently over Max's back. Sometimes I'd sit nearby, coffee in hand, watching them breathe together. I still missed Duke. That hadn't changed. His picture stayed on the shelf, his collar too. But now there was laughter in the house again, barking, the pitter-patter of claws on tile. One afternoon I clipped on their new collars for the first time. Max's was blue with a silver tag, the brave one. Bailey's was red, the heart. Mom's was black. She did everything. As I fastened the last one, she leaned her head into my hand and closed her eyes. I whispered, "You did, didn't you?" She exhaled slow, and for the first time, I knew we were a family now. Not patched together, not surviving, whole. I didn't save them. They saved me. We celebrated the small things, like when Mom made it up the back porch steps on her own for the first time, slow, deliberate, but proud. Or when Bailey finally let out a full-blown bark at the doorbell, Not out of fear, but because she decided it was her job now. Max started carrying a towel around like it was a trophy. I have no idea why. He'd parade it through the living room every morning and drop it at my feet like, here, I've done something. And honestly, he had every single day. They reminded me that healing doesn't look like what you expect. Sometimes it's not a light bulb moment. It's paw prints on a hardwood floor. It's falling asleep with the weight of two puppies pressed into your side and a mother dog breathing soft and steady at your feet. It's peace. The vet came by to check on Mom. She was stronger, still thin, but her blood work had stabilized. Her coat was starting to come back glossier in patches. Her steps no longer trembled. When the vet leaned in close to examine her stitches, Mom licked her face. "She's got a long life ahead of her," the vet said, smiling. "You gave her that?" I shook my head. "No, she gave it to herself. I just didn't get in the way." That weekend we went to the park. Max chased a frisbee like it owed him rent. Bailey splashed into the shallow creek with zero hesitation and emerged triumphant, soaked and beaming. Mom walked with me, slow but proud, heads turned. Strangers smiled. A few stopped to ask if they were all mine. I said yes and meant it. We laid out an old blanket beneath a cottonwood tree. I opened a thermos of coffee. Max curled at my feet. Bailey inched closer with every yawn until she was practically in my lap, and Mom laid her head on my thigh like she'd done it 100 times before. The sun filtered through the branches. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I'd found. A family that didn't start the way I imagined, but somehow it was exactly what I needed. Three hearts stitched back together, one day at a time. They weren't mine because I saved them. They were mine because they stayed. Sometimes the smallest ones carry the biggest hearts. Max and Bailey didn't just ask for help that day on the side of the road. They demanded it. They stepped into danger with no hesitation, no fear, because they believed someone would listen, someone would care. And their mother, she never stopped trying. Even when her body was giving up, her spirit held on for them. I used to think I couldn't open my heart again, that Duke had taken too much with him when he left. But these three didn't ask permission to heal me. They just walked in, tore down the silence, and stayed. Every dog has a story, but some stories rewrite yours. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. If this story touched you, share it. Share it for every dog still waiting by the road, still believing someone will stop, still hoping someone like you will see them. Don't forget to subscribe.